And welcome back to the show. A year into the COVID-19 economic crisis, as many as 20 million Americans still remain out of work, with the lowest wage workers hit the hardest by the pandemic. President Joe Biden has also signed the American Rescue Plan, enacting a nearly $1.9 trillion pandemic relief package with benefits including another round of stimulus payments, an extension of unemployment benefits, and generous tax breaks to low and moderate income people. The question is, how are things faring? And to get a better scope of this, we will now talk with the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group, Patrick J. Boyd. And Patrick, good to have you back.
Good morning. How are you?
Know that this $1.9 trillion package has rolled out. Americans are now starting to get their stimulus, but still a lot of questions remain unanswered. More particularly, how long this will last and what are some of the benefits to this?
Sure. Yeah, it is a ginormous package, $1.9 trillion, with a lot of the benefits that were part of the earlier stimulus plans included, but also some other things that we can talk about, like the tax credits, as you were mentioning. The first thing to keep in mind, I suppose, is just to go directly for the checks. Those stimulus checks are $1,400, and those are going to eligible families, which would be those individuals making $75,000 a year or less, or married couples making $150,000 a year or less. That's sort of the simple to understand benefit, the easiest one to go over. But at this point, there's not a lot of talk of other stimulus checks. So this may be the last one we're going to see for some time. Notably, this whole package was passed without the support of one Republican in Congress whatsoever. So I think we can see an erosion of the idea of or the spirit towards added stimulus, presumably because the recovery from the pandemic seems to be approaching us, we all hope.
So when we talk about the stimulus package, obviously we know that Americans, some are receiving, some are still in waiting and whether or not this is actually going to happen. We've got a lot of people right now currently unemployed. The question looms about unemployment benefits. Where do we see unemployment benefits playing out right now?
Sure. So the stimulus plan did include extension of benefits, and sort of those extensions. The easiest way to think about it is three types. First, there's the federal added benefit, which is used to be $600. That's now been trimmed back to $300, but that is continuing to be available to those people who are unemployed for qualifying reasons, and that is that is extended at this point until September 4th. So between now and September 4th, the benefit from the federal government of $300 will continue. That $300 is put on top of the state entitlement, and that state entitlement is obviously depends on the state you're in, but ultimately is going to be extended through September 4th as well. The two types of state entitlements are one for those sort of standardized workers you would think who had jobs and lost them because of the pandemic, but there's that secondary backstop for those people who are self-employed, maybe an Uber driver or something like that. Again, both of those benefits being extended, you're still eligible for unemployment, you're still going to collect unemployment, and those two benefits end September 4th or 6th. So the simple way to look at it, I guess, is that the benefit is going to be, for those people receiving unemployment, the benefit is going to decrease a little bit because the federal benefit is decreasing, but the base state benefit is going to stay the same, and that's going to continue through either September 4th or September 6th. The total amount of time that you can receive the benefits has also been extended. So it went from 24 to 53 weeks or 50 to 79 weeks, depending upon which of those two, self-employed unemployment or regular unemployment, you're receiving. Simple way to put it, and I know that's a mouthful, benefits are likely going to stay in place, or not likely will stay in place, but will end first week of September for everybody.
Yeah, we can talk about benefits for a few minutes, but only because we only have a few minutes in this segment. I want to move on to some other things too. When we talk about state aid, we talked about that a little bit, but I want to get to the topic of small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeblood of America, and we know that small businesses have been the recipients of PPP loans, and they have been going out for a second round. What can we anticipate going forward as Congress has put forward another stimulus package? The question about PPP and where do small businesses play out in all of this still remains unanswered.
Sure. So two things. The first round of PPP has now, as you mentioned, been extended. There's the second round. There's another $7 billion available for qualifying businesses to receive loans, either fully refundable or mostly refundable loans from the government for continuing their business. They have to dedicate a certain proportion of the money they receive to payroll for their employees and other operational things. In other words, showing that, thank you, government, for this help, and we're using this to keep our business alive and to keep people employed in our work, right? In addition, there's I think it's a $25 billion grant given to restaurants and bars, which were obviously, Darren, very hard hit by the pandemic, and can use that money to get back open and provide places for people to have a chance to meet again, have a drink, and just spend time enjoying some good local food and some good local company.
Yeah. Well, we know that as COVID-19 is not over, we still find many people are being infected and affected by it. And with that comes family leave and sick time. People are still dealing with the sick time. And we know that the quarantine that comes from exposure, where are we seeing family and sick leave at this moment?
Sure, and this is sort of consistent with the other talks we've had on the subject. There is still an allowance for people who are trying to recover from COVID, being diagnosed to see whether or not they have COVID, or getting their quarantine. There is leave available, but to be clear, the leave, which was once mandated, is now not required. So it falls in the discretion of the employer as to whether or not to give leave. I just want to be clear, if you have a disability or some meaningful condition that makes COVID extra dangerous, you still have the fundamental protections of the disability laws that have existed in this country before COVID stimulus and will exist afterwards. But for specific COVID legislation, the deal now is that the employer may but not must give leave. If they do give leave for receiving the vaccine, for being diagnosed with whether or not you have the virus, or for being treated, then you can ask your employer for that leave, and the employer can apply for and receive payroll tax credit as a result. But it is discretionary. They can choose to give it or not.
Yeah. What should we be paying attention to over the course of the next couple of months as things continue to change by the moment? The word of the day is stay flexible when it comes to what we hear.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One of them, of course, is and it's important just to note with this legislation, there's a child tax credit in this bill, which is not sort of part of the directly COVID mandated ideas, if you will, but it's taking the individual tax credit from $2,000 per child to $3,600. It is a 1-year change to the tax code, but a meaningful tax change. And I think it may be an indication of what we're going to have as a new social safety net or new social benefits under the Biden administration that has a Congress that is largely behind him. So something to be on the lookout for in terms of what's going to happen in the future. One other thing which is important but was very hotly contested, there's $350 billion in this stimulus plan for aid to state and local governments. Now, in certain state and local areas, of course, there were great burdens to be borne by the government in trying to deal with extra hospitalization, extra care, and now, of course, extra vaccine rollout and support. But there were some states where that wasn't the case, and so the state aid was controversial. Some of the state aid was given to underfunded or unfunded pension plans, which may be a meaningful problem to address, but was not popular to be addressed in this particular stimulus plan. And I do think some of those legislative debates are going to be things we're seeing more often as new legislation and a whole new administration with that legislation comes into power.
And so as we look forward to the spring and the summer, obviously a lot of look at the legislation that's going to actually be going forward and taking place. Both sides are continuing to haggle and wrestle out of Washington. But what we can see so far is not so much bipartisanship when it comes to this. Do you think that this is going to cause a delay possibly in seeing some of these laws and these things enacted?
I think there are going to be a lot of controversial issues, and I would agree with you that there's not a lot of total support for some of the new legislative options that may be available for Congress and the administration to think about. I do think, Daren, though, it's a very unusual stimulus plan, and it's a very unusual time in the history of our country. So I think with respect to this particular plan, there were just some needs to get certain monies out no matter what. And there was a lot of agreement on the idea that unemployment should be extended, that perhaps there should be stimulus checks. It was not a question of what, but a question of how much that was holding up the dialogue. And there was some urgency here, which I think sort of resulted in this bill being passed and this legislation coming out the way it does. So it could be that bipartisanship is going to continue, but I sure hope that perhaps when there's less urgent matters, there'll be a chance for collaboration and some good understanding and some good legislation.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us here on Open, sharing a little bit about, bring us up to speed about this new $1.9 trillion package that Americans are dealing with right now. Patrick Boyd, thanks again.
My pleasure.
All righty. Well, listen, now, if you want more information, please do us a favor, visit their website. And if you can visit Patrick's website, you can find out more information about the law group and things forthcoming. Let's take a quick break. We got more shows. Stay with us. We'll come right back right after this.